What's up, spectators? Welcome back to another episode of Ace Attorney Investigations. Last time we noticed the surveillance videotape was missing from the evidence, so we came back to the crime scene and started talking with Detective Bad, when we noticed that these rooms are very soundproof, except for the fact that the windows are open in both, and we can smell perfume coming from both. And now we've just presented that the loud sound from the television would have been heard from the other room because of the window. The answer is sound. So, no matter how careful the killer was, if the windows were open, the jig would be up. And since the windows in both defendant lobby number 1 and the hallway were open, that explains how the sound of a gunshot could be heard in both locations. Now we can finally connect these two things. Okay. Gunshot could be heard with the videotape. Alright. The missing piece of evidence is a video. That shows the moment in which Mr. Rell killed the embassy staff member. The sound of the gunshot left quite an impression on me when it was played during the trial. The video should have been returned to Mr. Faraday's evidence bag for the recess, and brought back here. If it disappeared after that time, then it's possible that the tape is still here in this room. Eureka! The evidence that the missing evidence created for me is the gunshot sound that no one should have been able to hear in the first place. That's why I was trying to look at the VHS player, you idiot! What have you been thinking about? Stop wasting time thinking and let's start looking again. It's not a waste of time to think, for I have figured out where we should look. And where would that be? I believe we should examine the television. The TV? Well, you kids have fun. Go ahead and examine whatever you like. I won't rest a blah blah blah. I already know exactly what I'm going for. Hushaw! It's a video player, and there seems to be a videotape inside. It looks like it. The tape must have stopped on its own when it reached the end. This tape, could it not be the missing surveillance tape? I suppose, but... Detective Bad, would it be alright with you if I verify the contents of this video? Sure, knock yourself out. Alright, now let's rewind this and see what we have. It's the gunshot, man, if I remember correctly. The footage of Rell killing the embassy staff member should be at about the 30-minute mark from the start of the tape. Understood. This should be about right. Now then, let's see. This is the footage of Mr. Rell shooting the embassy staff member. I knew it. The missing piece of evidence, the surveillance video, was here all along. This sound, what's the meaning of this? It appears that Detective Bad has figured out the true source of the gunshot he heard. With this, I think we can figure out the trick behind this double murder. Do you mean that you've figured it all out then? Yes, all I have to do now is show what the gunshot Detectives Bad and Gumshoe heard was, and through where they heard it from. Fine, in that case, show me what you've deduced. To show what the gunshot Detectives Bad and Gumshoe heard was, and through where they heard it from. I won't rest until I've inspected every suspicious-looking nook and cranny. Just as with the spilled perfume in lobby number 1. If the windows were open, that piece of evidence sound would also dissipate out. Now, to show what the gunshot Detective Bad and Gumshoe blah 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 blah. So, I'm just trying to figure out what order they want me to deduce this. Maybe it's the tape to the window? I think that makes the most sense. So, now let's go to the tape we just got. There it is. If the door and windows to the crime scene, namely this room that we're in, were closed, the killer could have used the gun and no one would have been the wiser. That's true. This courthouse does seem to be well designed for such a thing, as it were. But what happened in reality was Detective Gumshoe, Detective Bad, and Miss Yu. All three of them heard the gunshot. Well, the windows in the lobby number 1 and number 2 and the hallway were open. So naturally the people in those locations could hear it. But then why would the criminal open the windows in the first place? To allow the gunshot to be heard, I suppose. Correct. That's the only logical conclusion we can draw from this. But why was that necessary in the first place? I want a real answer, Miles. I demand satisfaction. Satisfaction. Very well, I believe that the killer wanted to manipulate our perception of a certain fact. What was it that the killer wanted to manipulate our perception of? The murder weapon? No, when the crime took place. The killer wanted to fabricate the time of death to their precise wishes. And they used the gunshot in the surveillance video to do so. So that's why the tape was left running. You mean, the gunshot I heard was from this video? Yes, which means that the murders really occurred at an earlier time than we thought. It must have been during the recess, but before Detective Gumshoe was on guard duty. Someone who has no alibi for that time period. And planned this crime out in advance. That person is the real killer. Oh, it's full! Yay! Makes up for my earlier mess-ups. Mr. Edgeworth! What is it? Miss Yu is asking for you. She's in the courtroom. She says that she's identified the murderer, but that she wants to clarify something. It looks like Miss Yu is still investigating something. Understood. Please tell her that I will be right over. I'll come along. I want to hear what she has to say. It would appear that the time has come to uncover the truth. Ah, yes. Ah, yes. Now this must be the last part. So this is like, what, part 4? I always thought there were 3 parts to each. Maybe there's 4. I haven't really been paying too much attention. Perfect time for some coffee. Kay, what are you doing here? Oh, hello, mister. I'm still investigating. But the object you're looking for is already... Kay, don't mind him. Please continue with your investigation. Okay, you got it. Detective Bad, haven't we already found what you were looking for? If it means I can keep her in the dark just a little longer, any little task will do. Oh, you're more sympathetic than I thought. I've been waiting for you, Edgeworth. I've also been waiting for the moment in which we can finally lay this case to rest. Oh, the moment in which we can finally lay this case to rest. Wasn't that when we placed Detective Gumshoe under arrest? I think we've more than solved this case already. Don't you? We'll see. It all depends on whether or not your logic holds. Oh, I see we even have a viewer in the gallery, and why even Mr. Bad is here. A viewer in the gallery? I'm hardly just a bystander. I have a duty to see this case through to the end. No matter how it turns out. Oh, is that right? Anyway, I thought you might like to hear what I've slaved away to find out. I've taken statements on every single person's movements. You know, I think this song might be in my top 3 favorites of this game so far. During the time when our suspect was in the hallway, I also confirmed that there is no possible route of escape from lobby number 2. Therefore, the killer must be without a doubt... Oh, the killer must without a doubt be Detective Gumshoe. And that's all you have? Yeah, that's all there is to my conclusion, and this case. Sorry, but I beg to differ. In a trial, there is always time for a rebuttal, and we are standing in a court of law. It'd be more than appropriate to follow the rules of court, in this case, don't you think? How absolutely like a rookie to think such a thing. But alright, I'll play along and give you a proper testimony. If my logic is correct, then I've already won. All I have to do now is to prove it, by showing who the real killer is. Everyone, sans the suspect, has an alibi for when the gun went off. Furthermore, the areas around the crime scene have all been thoroughly investigated, right? I also confirm that there is no possible escape route from lobby number 2. Which leaves us with one unshakable conclusion, that Detective Gumshoe is the killer. That was pretty short. Now that you have your testimony, I expect a good rebuttal, Edgeworth. But of course, there is no need to confront her logic head-on right now. I should instead focus on drawing out any trump card she has up her sleeve. Everyone, sans the suspect, has an alibi for when the gun went off.
Hold it.
Boom, 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 boom. The suspect? But I thought the Detective Gumshoe's alibi has already been proven. Oh-hoo! Are you joking, Edgeworth? I assure you this is no joke. Look, I know you heard from the judge earlier that the detective was in the hallway with Mr. Faraday's daughter eating a Swiss roll. Yes, that is correct. But see, that was 20 minutes before the real gunshot went off, right? And the problem is, there's no one else who can corroborate what he did since the snacking. I see she's done her research well. Which means that I should focus on drawing out whatever trump card she's withholding. Furthermore, the areas around the crime scene have all been thoroughly investigated.
Hold it.
Whether they have been thoroughly investigated or not is for me to decide. The scrunched eyebrows and lines on your forehead are back. Anyway, even if you believe it hasn't been exhaustive, the crime scene lobby number 2 has no way out other than the hallway Detective Gumshoe was standing in. And because he claimed to be there, that makes him the only possible suspect. But isn't it also possible that someone escaped through a window and into the garden? That's the first place everyone looks, silly. The police aren't a bunch of lazy bums. They looked into every possibility, you know. Isn't that right, Mr. Bad? Yeah. There wasn't a scrap of evidence to suggest someone used one of the windows. Man, he talks really slow. There also weren't any footprints or anything in the courtyard garden. I suppose they really did check everything that could be relevant to the case. I also confirm that there is no possible escape route from lobby number 2.
Hold it.
Are you absolutely positive that there are no possible routes of escape? Of course I'm sure. And why are you so certain? This is a courthouse, the place where criminals are brought to be judged. If there were an escape route, I'm sure every criminal would be using it to escape. It's just common sense. Miles Edgeworth, I suggest you use a bit more of it in the future. Which leaves us with one unshakable conclusion that Detective Gumshoe is the killer.
Hold it.
You may think it's unshakable, but to me there are still too many unanswered questions. For example, who was it that placed the gun in Mr. Faraday's hand? But you're the only one still wondering that. Detective Gumshoe probably had no idea which hand Mr. Faraday used to write with. Even if you know someone, it doesn't mean you'll know which hand they write with, right? I mean, I certainly don't care about that sort of thing. Boom, 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 boom. I'm not about to let her get a rise out of me with such a flippant statement. I suppose we've really reached the end now. I already have my trump card ready. All that remains is to play it. But before I do, I think I should inquire into a little something about her argument. You said earlier that you confirmed the alibis of every person other than the suspect. However, I don't recall either Francisca or myself speaking with you about the subject. But there were witnesses. For you, there is your mentor who gave you an alibi. I see. As for the little Missy, she came to the courthouse during the recess and was stopped by a security guard at the door to the hallway. She gave him quite a whipping for that, or so I heard. I'm the daughter of Manfred von Karma, and I will not be forcibly stopped by a guard or a bailiff or anyone else. So basically, the only reason Francisca bothered to show up today was because she found out that I was to be the replacement prosecutor? By the way, Miss Yu, what about everyone's alibi before Detective Gumshoe was assigned to the guard duty? What about them? Have you looked into what people were doing during that span of time? What kind of idiot do you take me for? It doesn't matter when the killer went into lobby number 2. From the time we heard the gunshot, to the time Mr. Bad and I arrived on the scene as we dashed from lobby number 1. The only person who could have committed the crime was Detective Gumshoe. Yes, let's talk about when you and Detective Bad heard that gunshot, shall we? I suppose that if we go by your logic, then Detective Gumshoe is the only one. But what if the crime had occurred at an entirely different time than when that gunshot you heard went off? What then? That gunshot was a trap meant to manipulate our perception? Sadly, your explanation is very lacking, Edgeworth. The gunshot we heard in lobby number 1. Care to explain how that could have been fabricated? We have the tape. Where's the tape?
Take that!
That tape? Ooh, you look a little nervous there. It's exactly what you think it is. This is the surveillance tape of Mr. Rell the prosecution presented in today's trial. This was found loaded in the video player in lobby number 2. That was connected to the large television that had its volume turned all the way up. You can't honestly mean that the sound we heard was the gunshot in the video. Ah, but I do, which leads me to my next point. The murders occurred much earlier than when anyone heard the gunshot. Ah, gone from lipstick to everything else. That's the only thing I can think of, too. After committing double homicide, the killer took the surveillance video out from Mr. Faraday's evidence bag, turned the television's volume all the way up, and left the video to play. If played from the beginning, it would take 30 minutes for the gunshot sound to come on. And since we now know that this method of time manipulation is possible, it opens up the possibility that the killer is someone other than Detective Gumshoe. Sounds from a television doesn't amount to much here. But of course, Mr. Prosecutor Edgeworth and Little Miss Von Karma already knew that much from the very beginning, right? Of course we knew, didn't we, Miles? Yes, of course. We know about the soundproof quality of this courthouse's rooms. Of course, I'm not about to admit that we had no idea until only a little while ago. That's right, and if the rooms are soundproof, then we should not have been able to hear it. And yet, we heard the gunshot clear as day. And that's it, end of story. But it's not. How should I explain why she was able to hear a gunshot from a soundproof room? The window was open. There is actually one common point between lobby number 1 and lobby number 2. And it is that despite the fact that both rooms have air conditioners installed, a window was open in each. Now, we know that the window in lobby number 2 was opened by the killer. However, a window in lobby number 1 was also opened. Objection! It's probably just coincidence that they were both open at the time.
Objection!
It was no mere coincidence, I assure you. Why was the window opened in lobby number 1? The answer is that a certain person did something to cause the window to be opened. And the person who triggered that action, that person is the real guilty party. The real killer in this double murder is... Ah, yes, we finally come to it. I hereby formally indict you of the murder of Mr. Faraday and Mr. Rell. What? You indict me? Are you serious, Miles? Why do you think she's the killer? I don't understand her motive just yet. But of course I'm serious. Because she is the only one who could have done it. Well, Miss Yu, do you still feel like laughing now? Ha, ha ha ha. Of course I do, Edgeworth. My argument must not be tight enough yet. Although, I never thought things would spiral into this. But I'll have you know I'm enjoying this dance quite a bit. I guess this means it's time for my own rebuttal now, right? You argue that the window was opened. However, do you have proof that it was I who did that? Furthermore, do you have proof that the tape was used in committing the crime? Frankly, I'm shocked at you for going around accusing people of murder like this. Especially with logic as full of holes as yours. This is where it really starts. And with it being 20 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. So stay tuned for the next one, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye!